Okay, so tell us a bit about what it is you're doing right now.
So at the moment, I'm a freelance journalist. I work in the video games industry. I've just come out of uni and finished my masters, but I haven't graduated yet. So, but basically, I'm on contract at a couple of places. I work news for IGN and Green Man Gaming, who are two, like, one's a business company, one's like a more like public-facing company, and then I freelance to a lot of other outlets like Kotaku, Eurogamer, Playboy, all that kind of thing. I just pitch them on a regular basis. And you're writing about products, no, but like what I like to do is talk about people. So I think definitely in the video games industry, a lot of the chat is about products, and say there's a controversy here about like microtransactions or something like that. But the more interesting stories are when you interview people about video games that are in development or like something like that, or talk about what goes on behind the scenes, because a lot of people know what games are, but not a lot of people know who makes them or why they make them or what goes into that. When you study a degree, my degree was MA Media and Journalism, and that was very focused on like you're gonna go into like the BBC or something like that, like and become like a politics reporter or something like that, or news. That definitely helps here. They taught me how to like write news. I think it's called like the F or something like that, where like you write it so like the top line is the most important bit. Then you get like you've probably all heard that, but it definitely differs when you're in the industry, because a lot of practices just sort of fly out the window, because there's no one controlling body that controls everything, if you know what I mean. If I write for, say, Eurogamer, they want me to do the formatting of the article in a different way than, say, IGN does, and something like that. Like different CMSs, if you use like WordPress and that kind of thing. Everything changes depending on the industry that you work in. I did my BE in history and archaeology, and whilst I enjoyed the subjects and stuff, I went on like trips to go dig in Sicily, and that was amazing. But like besides that, I was basically doing archaeology that I thought was interesting, but I didn't enjoy the actual work. And at the end of it, it was like go and like assess holes in public or something like that. And I was like, I don't want to do any of that. But basically, I decided to do it because I went and wrote for the Courier, which is Newcastle University's newspaper. I did a couple articles there. Prior to that, I was just like I was a very anxious person, very not very self-confident. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then I started writing for the Courier, and I felt like I had like something that was like, oh wow, I can do this. And like, it just developed from there. I was made editor of the Courier, and then like editor of a section of the Courier. Did a lot of that, did some pitching, became a freelance journalist. And then when it came to the end of my degree, I didn't really know what I was doing, so I was like, oh shit, like I need to get a job or something like that. But I looked into the masters, and I was like, okay, this would give me the perfect amount of space to create a career in freelance journalism. So I did the masters to get the qualification in the field that I wanted to be in, instead of the field that I was in. And then essentially just rolled from there. And during my year of doing my masters, as well as studying for my masters, outside of that time, I used that to basically propel myself into like a proper freelance career, when set up the safeguards and nets I have now, so that I can support myself without having a job, basically. Basically, I started off writing for archaeology gaming sites. So like I researched this like there's this people in, I think they're in the Netherlands. They're called like the Leiden or something like that. It's like basically a network of academics, but they run a website where they basically created this field of study called archaeogaming, which is basically the archaeology of video game worlds. And what I did was there was two pitches. My first pitch I sent to Playboy, and Playboy accepted it, and I was like, what? And I always break the ice with everybody, like, especially before I became a freelance journalist. I was always like, oh, like, and they were like, you're a writer, or where have you written? I'm like, Playboy, and they're like, oh, what kind of writer are you? And I was like, it's just about video games. But the main one was like, interviewed this guy who's an academic who dug up, there was a burial of loads of like game cartridges of a game that never sold in the desert in Texas, and he buried them, and loads of people, like, the company that made them buried them in the desert, and this guy like excavated them in like the 2010s, and I interviewed him for a site called Versions, for a publication called Kill Screen, which is a video game publication that doesn't exist anymore actually, but regardless, it's still up there. And it was about how he was launching into there was a new video game coming out called No Man's Sky, and they were basically going to become an archaeological team that would like track objects inside of the game like real archaeologists would at a site, like the stuff that I'd studied. So I used my academics there and his opinion to create like an interview article, and at that point I was like, wow, I need to do this full time, because that was so much fun. Basically, the proximity to home was useful. I don't think I could have. Master's funding is not like great at the best of times. The amount of loan that the government gives you is not loads. So it would be hard to support yourself if you were living out unless you had a part-time job. I lived at home for master's year. That essentially, I was born in Newcastle. I live in Wickham, which is just across the river. But basically, that helped me out a lot. And like I said before, like doing the masters gave me the space to be able to become a freelance journalist. Basically, without it, it was like the extracurricular time it was given me. It was like, I'll take on this commitment to get a qualification, but all the time that I wasn't studying, I was going to be using to bolster my career. And then when I was finished with my degree, I could just move into freelance journalism. And I think if I didn't do my masters, I would be sort of blocked out from that, if you know what I mean, because I would have to be working like a 9-to-5 job and then doing everything on the side, which would have been impossible. But I did choose to do the MA locally rather than around the country, because Newcastle offered something that was going to let me do filmmaking, and that was a part of my portfolio that I'd never ever built. So the masters let me get in front of a camera. I'd never really used a camera before, but by the end of my masters I'd done like 3 documentaries, and I'm proud of them. And like that was the main reason that I did it, is because I couldn't see any courses elsewhere that were offering both the media law and the documentary filmmaking that I wanted to do. I would say if you're like looking to be like a reporter or like work for the BBC, not culture like I do, or the ITV, you know, whatever. But look for somewhere that'll give you an NCTJ. I don't think.
Explain what that is.
Oh, sorry. I don't know the exact acronym, but basically it's just a qualification for journalists that teaches you how to do shorthand, which is a really archaic system where you basically write hieroglyphics in an interview to anyway. But basically it teaches you that. It teaches you how to like be a real journalist, sends you out on gigs to like interview people. There's like a couple of places that do it in the country called like news associates, which are not degrees, but degree wise some degrees offer that intact. If you want to be like a reporter and a news person, do that. If you want to work culture, like say work for like Vice or something like that, and like anything that I do, that sort of area, you don't necessarily need an NCTJ. Everything I've ever done has never been off the back of a qualification. My first freelance pitch to Playboy was on the back of articles that I'd written for the university newspaper. So like really, you don't, like, even though now I have a lot of good bylines, you don't need a good byline to get another good byline. You just need the strength of your idea. But as you were saying, go to somewhere. For me, it was about the filmmaking aspect of it. If you want to do that, come to somewhere like Newcastle University, where they have a culture lab that gives you like all of this equipment and just lets you run wild with it. Because the access to equipment is probably the biggest problem in like documentary filmmaking. As someone who, like, I'm like, I don't have that much money. Do you know what I mean? There was no way I would have been able to afford any of the equipment and have the opportunities that has afforded to me. So that's another reason why I would go to Newcastle. But look for places that have a good equipment, and look for places that offer you genuine qualifications and teach you media law, because having media law, even in culture, that perhaps it's an even bigger deal if you work for a culture site, because as well as reporting on the news and culture, you can get sued for libel and all that kind of stuff. Like, you got to be really careful. So I'd say media law is the one main understanding that every modern journalist needs to have. Just look at like Donald Trump's track record of suing journalists, and you can understand where that comes from.
Yeah.
All of the teachers are really nice. They are super helpful, and it feels a bit relaxed in a sense. It's not a very, like, you're not in all the time like you would be for an engineering course or something like that, but that's rewarded by the fact that the teachers are actually journalists, and they've done work in the field. I think like some of my teachers worked at like the BBC and stuff like that, so it was calming to know you're being taught by someone who's like an expert in the field, and they'd actually done the job. A lot of like university courses you do, teachers are amazing, but sometimes when you get thrown out of university into a field, you're still not going to know how to do the job unless you've been told practically how to do it. So it's very, very useful that this university in particular has like top academics basically to help you out. The equipment, like I said, the culture lab's amazing. The facilities as well. The computers in there are pretty good, and they have all the latest software, even though it like crashes every now and then, you get a bit annoyed, but regardless. And the sort of like the city and that the opportunities that gives to you, like amazing sights in Newcastle. I'm a little bit biased, but like it's a beautiful place, and like if you want to do documentaries, there's lots of interesting stuff going on here. Lots of interesting places that you can go for journalism. I know there's like the Jesmond Local. If you want to become a news reporter, you can go and work for them. But there isn't a lot of culture stuff. Like I feel like I'm the like only freelance culture journalist in Newcastle at this point, because there's nobody else who really does work for like the kind of sites that I do. But that's because there's a lack of big places up here. So that's maybe one of the problems in why people, if you're in journalism, you'd move down to London or something like that. But like I say, if you're freelance, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. For example, I'd say if you try to go and like interview a big business or create a story down south or something like that, there'd be a lot of like barriers to that. Like maybe PR doesn't want you to do it or something like that. Whereas like I was finding it quite easy to go to like a developer in the northeast and get access and negotiate access, just because they're quite friendly and nice and they want to actually help you tell a story. The small, like Newcastle is a big city, but it's quite small and compact and quite cozy, if you know what I mean. And there's a lot to be said for the people here, and a lot to be said about the stories that need to be told here that are not being told, whereas everybody's just trying to tell the same story elsewhere, maybe. I would say that be prepared to just know your grammar, know all the basics and that kind of thing, and basically just be prepared to learn about a lot of different things. I think that the course covers, media law. I'm sure it does like layup. I didn't do a lot of them because I did like the documentary stuff, but like be prepared to do a wide variety of things if you want to get the most out of the course, I think. I would say that like you could definitely like I'd say it's strenuous when it wants to be, but as long as you have the academic background from your, say if we're talking about postgraduate, if you know how to write academic stuff basically as an undergraduate in like a writing field in the arts, then coming into postgraduate media is quite easy. Because say like the first assignment I did was something where you had to like analyze an advertisement in a magazine, and that was like pretty much everything I'd done in history was pretty much that, just like look at a cartoon and do that. I didn't feel like I was being thrown in the deep end because I'd done the writing when I was doing my undergraduate for different sites. Therefore I had a basic, like I wasn't going in learning anything. I learned a lot, but I didn't learn, like they were like going over all topics like that, like say my news editor at IGN, I did a whole semester on news. And most of the stuff that they taught me was stuff that I already knew. But that wasn't a problem because it was like coming from different perspective. But just be prepared to learn a lot of different things, and especially if you're new to journalism, be prepared to accept a lot of criticism. I think that's a key thing for a journalist. Say like in my job, if I've got an editor, I always find it best to really listen to criticism and try and address it where possible. Be constructive about it, and don't like worry if someone's like haranguing your work. Like that's the point. The editor wants to create a good story, and if he doesn't like a bit of your story, like work with him to understand why and how you could be better and that kind of thing. And I think that applies to assignments as well. Listen to the teacher's feedback. I still think that the course is quite low key. It doesn't like get into the strenuous. Like one of my assignments was like write 3 news articles, which was like 600 words. And it's like I would say that that's not that tough, but then again I have the background of writing, so I'm not sure. Like I think if you were coming from something like engineering and you just walked into a media and journalism course, of course I would like through school and all of that I was always very into my writing and in like class and doing like English and that kind of thing. Maybe if you didn't have that, I would say you have to prepare a little bit, but I genuinely don't know how you would really prepare for that beyond like having your own blog, writing about stuff on there and just doing stuff in your own time. because there's not much that you can like learn more on site really beyond what the teachers are going to teach you and assign you to do. Like I said, like when you're a journalist, you do work every day. When you're at university, it's like I had like in the whole of my course, I was going in and learning every week, but I didn't have to submit an article every week like I do. Like I submit articles every week now. It was like only every assignment period I was doing work, if you know what I mean. The joy of freelancing is that there's no upper limit on what you can earn. So say if I like last month I did a lot of work and earned quite a bit. This month I'm winding down and I'm just like, okay, I don't really need to do that much because I've got that buffer. That's the joy of it. But yeah, essentially, jobs have a lot of barriers on them that, like, for me, like, it's kind of like my personality, I guess. I like to be, I can go, like, I can wake up in the morning, I can go anywhere and write, just with my laptop and do anything. I quite like that. I don't like being locked into a 9 to 5. I did a lot of placements whilst I was at uni, and whilst I enjoyed them, I learned that, like, you get to 2 o'clock and you've done all your work for the day, and they're like, okay, do you want to just like do Twitter or something? And you just sit there for like 3 hours and you don't really do anything. And it's like, I'm just like a waste of productivity on this company where like I could just go and like write an article or do something for myself. And I was always like a bit pushed off by that. That's why I wanted to do freelancing, because it was like, I don't want to be trapped somewhere when I'm not really doing anything, where I could be somewhere else doing something productive, even if it's not for them, you know? Oh yeah, you get them all the time. Like that's just so common. Like everybody, when I started being a journalist, everybody was like, "No, like you're never gonna make any money off this," and I didn't believe it either. But like, it's whether you decide you got to carve out a niche for yourself. You've got to be very like, you've got to push very hard. You've got to be very ambitious and very. You are selling. One key thing is that you're selling yourself essentially, not in like a bad way. I just mean in the sense that like you're selling your words, and you are a product to be bought by editors. So now, like, an editor might contact me and be like, "Oh, Jordan, I know that you've done this for us. Can you just do something like this similar?" And that's great because it's like I'm in demand. But you have to be really good on like social media because you've got to become a figure that demands work. If you know what I mean. That sounds crazy and as if it's like a ton of work. I don't like sit and agonize over my social media. I'm still very candid on it and post whatever like, my brain thinks. But I would say that like it's a lot of people will doubt you and a lot of people will say that you can never do it, but like just don't listen to them. Maybe they're jealous or maybe they just don't want you to succeed. Like that's usually what I found. And like you'll get past it, and then when you eventually make it and you start making money, you can just be like, well, they said I couldn't and it feels so much better. So don't listen to them, basically. Being a journalist is a very important job nowadays. You need to put the facts straight because the facts aren't straight. So I would say if somebody is saying that to be a journalist is you're not going to make any money, like sure it is hard out here and publications are closing and that kind of thing, but at the end of the day it's a job that needs to be done and it needs passionate people in it, and not everything's about having the most money, but like it's not to say I don't earn a comfortable living doing what I do, but that's only because I've got enough experience and contacts and relationships with editors now that I can rely and depend on things and have a really decent amount of income coming every month. I would say that you need to learn how to pitch. Pitching is the absolute like number one thing that you need to figure out. You got to be really concise and you've got to prove that you're the person who can do this job. You got to prove like that the article is going to be relevant, and you've got to just keep like you rely on your own brain. Basically, it's not like a new job comes in every day and you can like file it off and then put it away. You have to come up with an idea, and if you can't come up with ideas for this week, then you're not getting any work. So basically, you've got to be quite a creative person. Think of ideas that other people aren't thinking. Think of perspectives that only you can give. Say like that's why like diversity is amazing in journalism, because we get to hear so many stories from people who are from different parts of the world, of different like beliefs and that kind of thing, and that's what makes it great. I'd say personally, what's helped me is building relationships as well as pitching. So like once I've done work for an editor, keep talking to them and keep doing work with them, and then eventually they'll find out that they need you more and you need them more. That kind of thing. And be nice to people, be nice to other writers. It's very hard to be a journalist, and everybody needs the most help they can get. I'm in like a bunch of like Discord groups and like Twitter, stuff like that, where we all talk about our articles and share like opportunities and that kind of thing. Get into those networks and make friends. Like I've got like, I mean, friends that you wouldn't believe, friends from like around the world that live in completely like New Zealand, America, that kind of thing, that I've met at events sometimes whenever I go out. And it's like, make friends, and it can be a really happy place because you're all just sharing this stuff that comes from in your brain. So really lean into that, and yeah. I think everything is political. Like that's one thing that I think like games are political. Lots of video games can be political. And definitely I think stories need to be written either chastising games that don't embrace politics. Like a lot of like there was a recent story where a game developer was like, we don't think being political in our games will attract customers or something like that. And I think that's wrong. I think that like people should make games and insert as much of themselves in it as possible. I do think that you have to be politically minded and like, for example, if you want to be a journalist that eventually becomes like well known and successful, I guess you have to have like a voice that needs to be heard, and usually that is based on your own beliefs and principles, if you know what I mean. So people will listen to you if you've got like beliefs and principles that align with them, and then they're going to look to your stories. Think of someone like I don't know, like Owen Jones or something like that. He's like he's a Guardian columnist, but like everybody wants to read his articles because they ascribe to that sort of a certain belief that he has, if you know what I mean. And there's obviously like bad examples of that, like, you know, like Katie Hopkins and shit like that, Alex Jones, you know, like terrible people. But you kind of, it'd be a bit boring if you weren't political as a journalist, I guess, even as a games writer. Like I want to, for example, stories about accessibility. Video games can be really poorly accessible for some people, and often I think it's great to like share and blow up stories that are like great about that, like when a game includes accessibility options. Or like Microsoft recently announced like a controller that can be used by a lot of like disabled people with like many issues, and that's fantastic. And like I think just like it'd be a bit boring if you were just writing press releases and not like giving your opinion on things. I think opinions make journalism interesting, basically. Yeah, the scheduling, like the freedom is really great. Like I said, you're not locked in. I don't have any like, I don't have like 25 holidays a year. I can just sort of like, I guess I can go wherever I like. But again, are we going to address like the bad parts of that in another question?
Yeah.
Right away. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really enjoyable. It's nice to wake up in the morning and not have to wake up at the same time. And work to your own schedule, but like we'll get on to like the bad aspects of that, because there's a lot of them. It's not perfect, and sometimes you long for the 9-to-5 job that will give you the stability. But yeah.
Yeah. So worst things.
Yeah. So you don't have a schedule, which can be chaos, because you like. For example, when I was at uni, I just did all my assignments like really close to the wire. I was never like really good in that sense, but that's just the way I operate. That's not to say that I was bad at them. It's just to say that like, that's how I did it. But like that's in journalism, like I still kind of do that kind of thing where I'll wait. I'll like do my articles at certain times. You might be a bit like, for example, I'll do some articles at like 4 p.m. and they'll be done at 6, or I could do some articles and I'll be doing them at like 12 till 2 or something like so. You have no schedule, which is a bit chaotic, but really, you don't, like, as a journalist, if you're in an office as a journalist, you get thrown stories and everybody's like, write this now, and you continue that for the 9-to-5. As a freelance journalist, you can write whenever you want, whatever you want, kind of thing, as long as you're getting pitches in. I have a couple of reliable work things, so like I do the daily news for a website, which is like 200 words a day, that I write for the afternoon. But outside of that, I'm just sort of like playing games, thinking of pitches, and doing other stuff in my life, like, you know. Probably there's a couple of like wild ones. So like, I recently wrote a story about like a Pokemon Go clone, which was made by the Catholic Church, and it was called like Let's Go Jesus or something like that, and you had to like basically do like holy deeds, but it was like and you had to go and collect, like capture like Saint Bartholomew and stuff. That was quite wild. But the craziest thing I've ever written is probably there's two. The one I wrote about like how a piece of music in 1888 that came out like influenced like the landscape of modern video games, and you can hear it in every game in like a long string. And I wrote about all of them, and people seem to really like that one because it was weird. But the most funny one is probably, I was doing news for IGN, and Eminem released an album earlier this year called like Kamikaze, and he's alright. I don't really like, but I listened to a little bit. But there was this song that's on it where the producer sampled something, and a lot of like the games journalists in the sphere decided that it was like a game called Kingdom Hearts, and everybody was like, oh, Eminem sampled Kingdom Hearts. So I took the story in the Trello on IGN. Trello, there's an Eminem album called Kamikaze,
Yeah.
and the producer sampled a song on it, like a clip from a game soundtrack called Kingdom Hearts or something. And a lot of people were like, Eminem sampled Kingdom Hearts, and then I went and listened to this song, and I checked like the Wikipedia track listings and stuff like that, and I noticed that it wasn't actually that song that he'd sampled. So I basically wrote the story that was like, he didn't actually sample this, he sampled this other thing, and this took me down like a rabbit hole of writing stories for the next couple of days, where I was basically going back and forth with the producer of like Eminem's album, talking about like what he did actually sample, to the point where we actually released like the raw file and of the track to show everybody that he didn't actually do this, he did that. But basically the fun thing about that was that like I wrote a story just by, everybody else was just rewriting from someone else, but I took it and was like, is this real? Can we just step away for a second and check if this is actually true? And I did that, and everybody was like, oh shit. And then all the other sites like Kotaku, all the big ones, had to like issue to say like, actually we were wrong, sorry, like, which felt good as a journalist, because when you write in news all the time, usually you're just sort of writing stories that everybody has, but when you get a story that's your own and that you've modified or you've brought something else to it, it's always good to have that. Yeah, that was interesting. I like, I don't know, I guess like, I'm big into like samples.
Okay.
I like sort of music production myself, and whenever I hear samples and songs, I always find that really interesting. So when I saw that story, I was like, oh, okay, like, is this real? Like, it doesn't sound real. Like, it sounds like it's something else, but yeah.
What did your friends say? Did you have friends that noticed that you had been a part of that?
Yeah, like, it's so funny, like, a lot of the time I'll get like a message from a friend who'll be like, oh shit, you were like, they mentioned your name on this podcast I was listening to, or something like that, because like, they'll be listening to another podcaster, but they'll look on like news sites for stories, and they'll be like Jordan Oloman, but they never get my name right, which is always annoying, because my name's like Jordan Oloman, but like everybody's like Oloman or like Jordan or something, and I'm always like, oh my god. But it's always weird when people are like that, because people can have like messaged me before being like, oh, like I was reading a story, like, and then I realized that you wrote it, and like I couldn't believe it, because like it's weird, like you don't think about who writes the article usually, you just sort of read it, but like the people who check sometimes message me and are like, oh shit, you wrote this, and I'm like, yeah. But yeah. I have this sort of like worldview where like there's if you treat your life like a journey to a point where you eventually succeed, like you're living your whole life and you're doing like good things, and then you're always looking for that like point where everything's perfect and you've succeeded and that's it, and like, but you never know what will happen after that. I don't really subscribe to that, because I think that like every time that something successful happens to you, you just take it in, and then you're like, oh, okay, what next? Like you get your A levels, and it's, I mean, we probably don't even care about our A levels anymore. Do you know what I mean? It's the same with a university degree. You get a university degree and you're like, okay, that was fun and that was great, and like it feels good to have graduated, but then you're like, what next? So every byline that I get, like recently I got on like Eurogamer, which was like a big one for me. But I got that, and I really enjoyed it, and I enjoy the moment, but like it's always like celebrate everything, not just like the big, there's not like one mode for success that you can subscribe to. Like it's not like I'm gonna get this one byline and then that's it, and I'm this like hero journalist that's like completed his career and I'm done. The work keeps just coming on, if you know what I mean. I'd say in games you write about controversy a lot. There's a lot of stuff like microtransactions and things like that, and injustices like working practices crunch. A lot of game development houses crunch, which is where they work like 100-hour weeks or something like that to get games finished. Well, 100 hours is a bit exaggerating, but you know what I mean. Like they work overtime, sometimes mandatory overtime and when you write stories about that, that's often controversial. But what shocks me the most is that like comment sections on like gaming sites are very like annoying, like, and I never read them. Like IGN is like the biggest news site in gaming, and whenever I write a story for them, like you wouldn't believe it, but probably the most controversial article I wrote was, and it's not controversial at all. I wrote that like, you know, Queer Eye, the Netflix TV show that I love, was coming back for like season 2. And the comment section just went crazy, like, how dare you write about this? Like, this is like, why is this news? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it is news. Like, and it's just because people are like right-wing shits who don't give a fuck about like diversity or anything like that. So I'd say that's probably my most controversial article. But it's not controversial. That's just like what some people's political views deem as controversial, which is dumb.
Yeah, that's interesting. So would you say that like a lot of gamers are, I don't know, homophobic and maybe?
I wouldn't like. I'd say there's definite sects that are, and there's bad eggs in every sort of community. I wouldn't totally tar everyone with the same brush, but like just look at like the Daily Mail's comment section or anything like that. Like everybody who comments on websites mostly is a bit of a shit, really. Like you can get good comments sometimes, like thoughtful comments, like Eurogamer and Rock Paper Shotgun are 2 sites that I've written for, where I always get like really nice comments, people like actually discussing the story. But if it in news, a lot of the time, if you're writing just a news story that isn't like asking you any questions, a lot of the comments can be like really quite toxic. But toxicity is rife in like every community. I wouldn't say that all, like I could never say that like all gamers are like homophobic or whatever, because I'm not, and like I know that a lot of other people in my community of games writers and people that I enjoy in that community are not at all. And it's quite like especially in the freelance community in games journalism, a lot of people are very diverse and we're all very, very progressive, and we write a lot of progressive stories. But it's just annoying that a lot of the gamers who comment on it, who just want to read the same things all the time, can't accept like when things are more diverse or inclusive, and that's really annoying to me.
Do you ever respond to those comments?
No. I'll respond to them if they're nice comments, and it's like, oh, like this made me think about this. Like there's a couple stories. It was like I wrote a story about edutainment last week, which is about like how back in the day there used to be like edutainment games on the PC and the kids could play that were like good and taught kids like maths and English and that kind of stuff, and they were like really helpful. Whereas now they just kind of like play Fortnite, Minecraft, and it's just like, what does that teach you? But some people commented on that and they were like, oh, you know what, like you've made me think, like maybe I'll go back and like show my kids some of these games that I played as a kid to try and like tweak their imaginations. And like I thought like, oh yeah, like I'll always reply to comments like that because they're nice and they're actually thinking about the article and like they feel rewarding to read. But mostly like if I'm like writing news for a big site, I don't read the comments because they're mostly not good. I think that when you write stories that are progressive and when you write about like things that are good and get good out there, or in the other sense like report on things that need to be talked about, like say like sexual abuse in companies, or like poor like crunch work ethic and things like that, when you report on these things and expose these things, I think that you're doing a service because you're sort of getting the bad eggs out and informing people on the good side of everything and that kind of thing. Like I said, you have the good side and the bad side that you have to report on to be progressive, essentially. I wouldn't say that like, maybe I do have an impact, I guess, on what some people think when I write stuff, but it depends how much opinion you can include in the article. Like for IGN, you're not really supposed to include much of your opinion. It's more like just writing the news, and this is the news and this is what's happening. Whereas like say like Green Man Gaming, more of my opinion goes into it. It's kind of like I'll say like personally, you know what I mean? Like instead of just being like, this is what the news is, but there's validity to both sides of that. I'm not saying that it's bad that you just don't insert your opinion, because the BBC won't insert its opinion into a news article. Do you know what I mean? So.
So what would you say is your biggest career achievement so far?
I recently got to review like Red Dead Redemption 2, which some people were saying is like the game of the generation, which is really cool, and it was amazing to sort of play that. It used to be just like being on a site, do you know what I mean? It used to be like at the start it was just like, oh yeah, I'll get to be like on a big site and that's cool. And but they just keep coming in. Like say like I got sent to California last week. That was insane. I've never ever been to California. I got sent to like Germany early this year for like a week. Been sent to like London. Those events were always fun. It always feels like a good time. But achievements, because as a journalist, every time you get a new site, it's kind of an achievement. There's not one that sort of like really sticks out for me. It's mainly when I get a story out there that's very personal to me. That's like a huge career achievement for me. So say like the last one on Edutainment, a Eurogamer I got out, was like about me as a kid and the first game I ever played and how that led into my career as a writer. And writing something so personal that isn't spinned for relevancy or anything like that was really evocative and like felt good. So I'd say that story and like the Kotaku story I did about the piece of music was amazing, because it was like that just came like purely from my own imagination, and to get that up on a big site, lots of people to read it, millions of people to read it sometimes, is like, that's amazing. But I don't think it's ever like sank in for me. Like I keep just moving, and then eventually something else happens, and it's like people are like, wow, that's so amazing, and you just sort of like you switch off a bit, because it's a bit like you can't keep taking all that praise and not letting it go anywhere, if you know what I mean. You got to internalize it somehow. So I like to stay very humble. I don't like to, brag a lot. So I did a documentary on the Granger Market, and I'd say that the Granger Market is probably my favourite hidden but not hidden gem in Newcastle, because there's so many places in it that are amazing. Like I'll regularly go for like a slice of pizza at the pizza place in Granger Market because it's amazing. It's a place called Meat Stack that used to be called The Grind, and I used to go to The Grind a lot when I was in like number 28, but Meat Stack is now in the Granger Market. Go there, they are like the best burgers. I've been to California like 2 weeks ago. I went to In-N-Out, I had the animal style burger, I had like the double, everything, and it like was good, but I was like, I'd rather have a Meat Stack right now. So I mean, that's a pretty shining endorsement. Other places that are really cool in Newcastle, the Quayside. I go away from Newcastle for like even a week, and I'll come back and I'll miss the Quayside because of how beautiful it is. And then I guess food-wise, there's just so much. Like I could keep talking forever. There's like the Italian place in Granger Market's great. Like just
have
basically.
you been to Calzone? Yeah. What do you think of it there?
Calzone's great. They do amazing like proper Napoli pizzas. I went to Italy earlier in the summer and like had some like proper pizza, and I think they're the only place in Newcastle that does like proper pizza. Little Italy, that Italian pizza slice place does it as well, but like not as like good or like done in like a proper Napoli oven. Like, so that's pretty amazing. Crackling, you ever been to Crackling?
Oh, I've heard about it.
So
they do sandwiches.
Yeah, so there's like it opened like to like relatively low fanfare, but it's on the street with the bus with Dat Bar, the bottom of Monument. Just go there for like a sandwich one time and just like check it out and see what you think, because honestly they're amazing. I'll always return there.
One or more?
There's still a couple of bylines that I would like to get if I can, but they're not like eating away at me. They never really do, because all sites pay relatively the same, so it's not like as if this is going to be like the big break or something like that. It's just good to get exposure on different sites and get people to know your name. Outside of that, I'd like to do more creative stuff. Like I've done like my documentaries and things like that, but like I've made a couple of little games. I like to experiment with that kind of thing. Write a bit more creatively. Write like short stories or like something like that. I've quite enjoyed like experimenting with something called Tyne, which is like a narrative game maker. So probably go with that. Like I like journalism and I really enjoy it, but I think eventually down the line you want to, it's as you're writing about all these amazing things that other people do, you kind of want to make some stuff yourself. So I think that's what I want to really develop in 2019 and go into that kind of thing, whilst keeping up writing about stuff at the same time, because a lot of people juggle that. And it sounds like a pretty cool career. So like there's like I think my dream job would probably be like a narrative designer. So like in video games you need a narrative designer who writes the text and stuff like that, and then ties it to like actual things in game that operate, and systems and characters and that kind of thing. So like storytelling, but within the game space, would be kind of like the kind of job I really want to do at the end of the day. Journalism is like a great job and I really enjoy it, and it's kind of like the way to move towards that and get experience in that. So if you want to be a freelancer, don't be scared. Literally people can be scared of emails. People can overthink emails, but it's just an email. And like the worst thing they can say to you is no. And a lot of editors actually want you to pitch them, want you to say stuff to them, and like give them story ideas. They want the innards of your head rather than just what's relevant, if you know what I mean. Sometimes you got to pick the right publication for that. And other sites can be really dependable if they don't want that. They just want you to write things that are relevant. But regardless, be very imaginative, be very creatively free, and just be yourself and be vigilant, and don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it, because you can.
Cool. Thanks.